The Long List Anthology Volume 4, edited by David Steffen, closes on Kickstarter this weekend. Don't miss your chance to put your finger on the pulse of genre short fiction with stories by Yuji Foster, Rachel Swirsky, Ken Liu, and many, many more. Check the show notes for a link. This is Cast of Wonders, the young adult short fiction podcast bringing you stories of the fantastic. Welcome. Episode 326 for October 7th, 2018. Our story this week is Forgiveness by Lee Sipis, originally published in Asimov Science Fiction in February 2015. We have a content warning this week, everyone. This story prominently features an abusive relationship. Please make the right choice for you about whether or not to listen. We'll be here again next week if you skip this one. Lee Sipis is the author of 4 young adult fantasy novels published by HarperCollins, starting with her first book, Mistwood, which is about an immortal shapeshifter trapped in the form of a human girl. Her recent novella, Timshala, was published by Book Smugglers in the autumn of this year. She has also published numerous works of short fiction. She lives in Silver Spring, Maryland, with her family. The story is narrated by Nika Harper, a writer, performer, and geeky personality who spends long, solitary nights on the internet because her brain won't shut up. She lives in Los Angeles, California, where she houses her collection of magic wands and an overwhelming stockpile of empty journals. Her work is at thisisnika.com, which will be linked in the show notes, but the good stuff, she says, pictures of her cat, is on Twitter, at Nika Harper. And now, we've a tale to tell.
Forgiveness by Lee Sipis. Narrated by Nika Harper. The day Michael came back to school, I was still wearing long sleeves. Not because of the bruises. That's what everyone thought, but the truth was the bruises had faded weeks before. I didn't know why I was wearing them myself, until Michael slunk through the front doors, and everyone stopped what they were doing and turned to stare at him. Once he would have laughed and strode through them, meeting their eyes and daring them to say something. Instead, he focused on the yellowed, speckled white tiles as he walked down the hallway. My heart lodged in my throat. He had always been so fierce, so vital, with so much life in him that it spilled out around the edges and infected everyone close to him. Now his steps were slow and heavy, and when Nandini stepped ostentatiously away from him, he flinched. I did that to him. I took a deep breath, stepped out of the classroom where I had been hiding, and walked across the tiles to meet him. Aim number 1 accomplished. No one was looking at him anymore. Everyone was looking at me. Everyone but Michael. He saw me, but wouldn't look me in the face. His blue eyes flicked to my sleeves, and I waited for him to ask if the bruises were still there. That was why I had been wearing long sleeves, waiting for this moment. His eyes finally met mine, his expression a mute plea, and my heart thudded dully. Somehow, just by walking over, I had hurt him. Again. Walk away. How many times had Nandini urged me to do just that? Only this time, I did. As soon as I slammed the stall door shut, I heard someone else walk into the girls' bathroom. No question who it was. Go away, I said. I hadn't started crying yet, but my voice was quivering. It's Nandini. Like it could be anyone else. Nandini had been playing concerned best friend to the hilt the past month, and though she 80% meant it, I was still really, really sick of hearing it from her. Go away, I said again, with a viciousness Nandini claimed I learned from Michael. She doesn't know me as well as she thinks. A pause, and the bathroom door closed again. I wondered if Michael blamed me. Probably. Ms. Thompson said he could still feel anger. He just couldn't act on it. But she didn't know Michael as well as she thought. Acting on his feelings was the way that he felt them. Nobody knew Michael, not really. Ever since he agreed to get a chip, and people only agreed to get chips to avoid jail time, everyone talked about him like he was a monster. Like his mistakes were all he was. Like they had no flaws, nothing ugly deep inside them. The way they looked at him. As if he was a zoo exhibit, a monster in a cage. The way his head stayed down, as if he had been forced to agree with them. Oh, Michael. I blame myself too. Of course, I had to have an extra therapy session that afternoon to help me deal with him being back. Ms. Thompson, leaning over the desk with her blonde hair swinging around her chin, wanted to know how it made me feel. It made me feel happy, I said. I had been behaving for weeks now, playing my part, but just being in the same building as Michael made me defiant, the way he once would have been. I missed him. Result: an extra therapy session next week. Clearly, that feelings can't be wrong sign on the office wall was a blatant lie. I spent the next week scheming to get Michael alone. Going to his house was, of course, out of the question. His parents hated me, and I didn't blame them. School was equally problematic. Nandini stuck to me like lichen, warding off everyone else with protective looks, steering me clear of the more obnoxious girls, as if I couldn't handle their questions. More likely, she was afraid of what I would answer. In the end, Michael found me, the way he always did. I was on my way to extra cred bio when he stepped in the hall in front of me, gave me the crooked grin I had missed so much, and disappeared into an empty classroom. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I slammed the door behind me and flung myself into his arms. At that moment, it didn't even occur to me that he might push me away. He didn't push me away. Maybe 20 minutes later, I finally untangled myself from his arms. My lips were puffy, my skin was on fire, and I was so happy. I hadn't realized how unhappy I was. I love you, Michael said. He was breathing hard, almost desperately, his dark hair a mass of damp tangles. Anna, I missed you so much. The treatment was awful, but not being able to see you was the worst part of it. I burst into tears. Don't. He grabbed my hand and drew me close. Don't cry. It'll be all right. We're together again. And we were. Just like that. I should have known it was inevitable. Not that it would be easy. My parents would never accept my decision. Just thinking about how they would react made me want to crawl in a hole and hide. They couldn't know. No one could know. How are we going to manage that? I said. We go to the same school. We'll manage, Michael said, with the easy confidence I remembered. He had never, ever been afraid of a challenge. And when I was with him, neither was I. I was hurrying out of the cafeteria. If I ate quickly, I could still 10 minutes with Michael before lunch ended, when someone stepped in front of me. I almost collided with a silver sports jersey. Oh, sorry, I began. No, it's my fault, Daryl said quickly. I wanted to ask you something. I blinked up at him. In retrospect, it was stupid that I had no idea what was coming. Daryl was a jock, not one of my and Michael's crowd, but I had been in a study group with him when Michael was arrested. He had been concerned and sympathetic, just like everyone, and I hadn't really noticed his existence, just like with everyone. The spring dance, Daryl said, and ran a hand over his short curly hair. It was unusual to see a guy that good-looking get nervous. If his skin was lighter, he definitely would have been blushing. Do you think you would want to come with me? I froze. That night, I thought of a dozen good reasons for saying no. It's too soon. I need to be on my own. I'm going with Nandini. A girl's only sort of packed. Anything. Instead, I said the worst possible thing. I said, I can't do that to Michael. Daryl's jaw tensed, but his voice was gentle. Anna, you don't have to be afraid of him anymore. I wanted to slap him across the face and fill that patronizing mouth with blood. For a moment, I understood exactly how Michael used to feel. Still feels, I guess, though he can't slap anyone, not anymore. As if the only thing between me and Michael was fear. as if Michael's temper erased his brilliance and his courage and his sly sense of humor and his love for me. Back when he could hurt me, it was all true. His temper, his need for control, overshadowed everything else. For a long time, his fists mattered more than anything. I proved that when I reported him. It was the hardest thing I ever did, but I did it because I knew I couldn't be with someone who was hurting me. But he couldn't hurt me anymore, and that changed everything. Why did nobody get that? It doesn't matter how angry he gets, Daryl says. The chip removes his ability to engage in violent behavior. He can't hit you. Thank you, Daryl. I know how it works. I crossed my arms over my chest. And weren't you on the anti-chip side of the debate team? I remember your speech. Human freedom, moral responsibility, blah, blah, blah. What happened to all of that? What happened, Daryl said tightly, was that I saw your bruises. Like it was my fault. He had to let go of his holier-than-thou beliefs. I stepped back and his eyes widened. He said, "You don't have to be afraid of me. Even without a chip, I'd never hurt you." He looked over my shoulder when he said I. I turned around. Michael was leaning against the wall, watching us. I knew I didn't have to be afraid, but I couldn't help it. I was. I waited for the inevitable consequences. But nothing happened. Nothing happened for 5 days. Michael didn't come over to me, didn't talk to me, didn't meet me at any of the places we had been meeting. We weren't in the same classes anymore. His had all been switched, so I didn't get to see him at all. Was that what he was going to do now when he was mad? Just ignore me? It was almost worse than the alternative. I didn't know whether the silent treatment was going to end. I didn't know if it was going to end. At least then, I knew when it was over, everything would go back to normal. On the 6th day, I did something I never would have dared to do before. I went to Michael and forced the confrontation myself. Told him he was being an idiot. Daryl was only asking. I hadn't said yes. I loved him. I would never cheat on him, and he had to trust me. He was furious, his eyes sparking, but he had to listen to me. There was nothing else he could do. We had a month together, a blissful, joyous month before my parents found out. That went about as well as could be expected. "I'm 17, I shouted after they had been going at me for an hour. "I'm old enough to know my own feelings and make my own choices. I love him. I need you to trust me." "Trust you?" My dad was doing all the talking by now since my mother was sobbing hysterically. "Do you understand how hard last year was for us? Forget us. For you. We don't even know everything he did to you. How could you possibly—" "You're being irrational." I was trying my best not to cry, but I was fighting a losing battle. "Michael won't hurt me ever again. He can't. If you look at it logically, I'm safer with him than anyone else in the world." "It's not that simple. He's a monster." "He is not. He had one flaw, and it is fixed. So what is your problem?" "It's not fixed," my father said. "He's controlled. Muzzled." That did it. I whirled on my heel. "I just don't understand," my mother gasped through her tears. "I don't understand, Anna." "I know you don't," I snapped. "But I'm the one who was hurt, and I forgive him. Why can't you?" To be fair, I had to meet Daryl to get the assignments I missed during the new extra therapy sessions required by my parents. To be honest, I didn't have to laugh quite so hard at his imitation of Mr. Purcell, and I didn't have to brush his arm with my hand when I said thank you. "You're testing," Ms. Thompson said when I brought it up, "making sure you're really safe with Michael, even when you do things that used to lead to his outbursts." By now, the fact that I was back with Michael was public news, but Ms. Thompson, unlike my so-called friends, still had to talk to me. She didn't know me that well, though, which is why she was giving me benefit of the doubt. I knew better. I wasn't testing. I was goading. But I didn't know why. I loved Michael. I didn't want to upset him. Or didn't I? Maybe I wanted a little bit of revenge. Maybe anyone would in my position. That answer just made sense. Just like Ms. Thompson's, but it didn't feel any more true. Michael was practically crying when he confronted me. He said it proved what he knew all along, that I was a stupid slut who wouldn't be faithful unless I was afraid. His fist clenched and his arm bulged, and I almost backed away, but he was so clearly helpless. He couldn't touch me. I was safe. I stood my ground, and he was the one who left, storming away with his fist clenched at his side. He gave me the silent treatment for a week this time, but in the end, he couldn't resist me. He never could. And it wasn't like anyone else could talk to him. Or me. Nandini's interactions with me had been reduced to sending me article links. The last one, Chips, how safe are they? Are there workarounds? And are the criminals figuring them out? Daryl and I still hung out, because we were in almost all the same classes, and he was surprisingly smart for a jock. A part of me felt guilty for hanging out with him. Guilty with a lining of fear. But that was just old habits, and I had to overcome them. Things were different now. I could be with Michael and still have a life. I should be able to have another friend, even a cute guy friend, without feeling like everything would come crashing down on me. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Not being with Michael or not hanging out with Daryl. This was what a normal life felt like. This was the way things were supposed to be. Then, during one of our fights, about Daryl, they were always about Daryl, Michael grabbed my wrist. Just for a second, and then he winced and let go. But I didn't think he could have done that a few weeks ago. Did chips weaken? Could they weaken if someone was fighting them all the time? They're not supposed to. They're supposed to last forever, but even though I never read Nandini's articles, even though they were all by crackpots, they had planted a seed of doubt. And I hadn't deleted them. I read them until 3 a.m, and read the comments too, which was, of course, a terrible mistake. A lot of people were convinced the chips could be fought, that the human brain could find ways to work around them, to gradually weaken them by sheer persistence. There was no proof, but there were a lot of anecdotes from random strangers on the internet. People, I reminded myself, who I didn't know and had no reason to trust. By the time I clicked the computer shut, I was scared again, and I didn't like it. I'd forgotten how it felt. Next week, Michael grabbed my wrist and squeezed. Long and hard enough to hurt. I had also forgotten how it felt to be hurt. There was so much pain. That was obvious, it should have been. But everyone had talked to me so much about the other parts of it, the helplessness, the guilt, the loneliness. I had almost started to think the pain was unimportant. It wasn't. Fear spiked through me, and memory came flooding back of being hurt and hurt and hurt. I didn't want that. I had never wanted that. What I wanted, always, was Michael. A Michael who didn't hurt me. And now I had that. So why was I doing this? Why was I spending time with Daryl, pushing Michael harder and harder? I said, in a low whisper, I won't talk to him again. I promise. Michael let go of my arm and leaned in to kiss me, as if nothing had happened. After he left, I sat for a long time holding my phone. I could call my parents, or Ms. Thompson, or the police, and tell them. The chip had been part of Michael's plea bargain. It wasn't an agreement he could back out of. If I told, he would be taken back to the clinic, and the doctors would find out what was wrong. They would implant a new chip, a stronger one, and monitor him more closely afterwards. I would be safe with him again. Why wasn't I dialing? Was there a part of me that wanted to be hurt? Was it my fault? The way that I used to think it was? Michael was really sweet the next day, like he used to be. During lunch, we lay together on the lawn and talked so long we both forgot to eat. He told me he wasn't making any college choices until I decided where I was going. My heart turned over and flooded me with hope. It wasn't like he had left bruises on my wrist. It wasn't even like he grabbed that hard. I was just overreacting. I love you, he whispered. I tried to stop loving you when I was in treatment, and especially after the operation. I tried so hard. Then I saw you the first day back, and in 1 second it was all over. I floated through the weekend in a haze of happiness. Daryl cornered me after study hall on Thursday. I tried to squeeze past him, but he grabbed my wrist exactly where Michael had. I yelped and he let go instantly. "What's going on?" he said. "Nothing," I lied. "I'm not trying to avoid you. Michael and I are spending a lot of time together, that's all. Deciding on colleges." He stared down at me, chest heaving, and I waited for his accusation. I hadn't been fair to him, and I knew it. I wish I could have done things differently, but in the end, he was just a random guy, and he'd find someone else to flirt with. Michael was the one who mattered. "Why?" Daryl said. "Why are you with him? I don't get it." "I love him," I said. "I never stopped loving him." Daryl's face tightened. He shook his head and then, finally, turned and walked away. Not quite fast enough. I caught Michael's steel blue eyes across the room, recognized the familiar set of his mouth, the fury building in him. Miss Thompson's office was down the hall. Nandini's number was the first speed dial in my phone. My parents' was the second. I could have called any of them. I didn't, even when he started toward me. I didn't know why until I saw him coming up my front steps, a bouquet of flowers in his hand. Blue and lavender, my favorite colors. So large, the petals almost obscured his face. And then I understood. My upper arm throbbed beneath my long sleeve, and my stomach felt tight and bruised. It hadn't been his worst rage, not by a long shot. He had been sufficiently in control enough to avoid my face. My parents hadn't noticed the careful way I was moving. Nobody knew anything. Nobody would. I picked up the phone and dialed. He was on his 10th knock by the time I got to the door. After only a moment's hesitation, I opened it. I knew his pattern. There was nothing to be afraid of, not right now. I took the flowers without speaking. His face was drawn, stark hollows beneath his eyes. He looked at me, then away. "Anna?" he whispered. "I'm sorry. I can't. I love you so much, and I hate that I'm just so sorry." "I know," I said. He looked up, a faint, fearful hope dawning on his face. "Can you forgive me?" "Yes," I said. He smiled at me, radiant, the smile of pure joy that had drawn me to him the first time I saw him. It filled my heart to know I had caused that joy in him. It eased the fading pain in my arm and back. But when he stepped forward, I stepped back. "Anna?" he said, hesitant. And then he heard the sirens. He could have run, but he didn't. He stood there, the brightness draining out of his face, staring at me. "Why?" he whispered. Anger came to my aid at last. "Are you joking?" I yanked up my sleeve. The bruise was purple-yellow, still darkening. He flinched. "But why not yesterday? Why now, when I came to apologize?" As if his apology should have made everything better. But I had also thought it would. It was what I had wanted, what I had never gotten while he was chipped. He hadn't been able to hurt me anymore, but he also hadn't been sorry that he had. This was why I flirted with Daryl. This was why I hadn't told. It wasn't that I wanted to be hurt. I wanted him to be sorry. I had thought that once he was, we could be together again. I took another step back, hoping I wouldn't cry. A new chip, hopefully, would fix him. But it wouldn't fix us. "You don't have to do this," Michael said. "I do," I said. "I have to do exactly this." He stared at me blankly. Behind him, a police car pulled onto the curb, red and blue lights flashing. I went inside, through the kitchen and into the family room. I put the flowers carefully into a crystal vase and filled it halfway with water, and by the time I was done, I had my tears under control. I yanked my sleeve down over my arm and went outside to give my statement.
I almost passed on hosting this story. Without going into detail, let's just say the subject matter is familiar. The doubt, the anger, the mood swings, feeling defiant and clear-headed and in control one moment, and racked with indecision and self-doubt the next. Those states changing in an instant, caused by stimuli you can't always identify, yet alone avoid. Second-guessing yourself and others, and yourself again for how you react to others. Constantly pulled back and forth between who you are when you're with them, with your family and friends, and when, or if, you're by yourself. It sucks. It's a layered, nuanced kind of suck. Tight, close layers, like self-esteem and identity and the turmoil of transitioning from a dependent to an adult. Then on top of that, you have peer pressure and gender norms, and right after them, the balancing act of your personal maturity versus your physical age, and what that implies legally about what decisions you are and aren't allowed to make. And all of that is even before we get to the speculative possibility of the chip and its implications. It's also worth taking a step back and acknowledging that as awful as this situation is for Anna, there's also an awful lot here in her favor. She lives at home with her parents. She's at least moderately popular and has one good friend who sticks with her throughout the entire story's events. She's in school. She's getting counseling. Even when her actions are to push those supports away and rebel against them, they're there. Take it from someone who once didn't have those supports. Their presence matters. Anna's actions and her reasons for those actions are hugely up for interpretation, and a lot of that interpretation may depend on what you bring with you to this story. This is a story, I think at its heart, about assumption. Challenge yourself to examine your assumptions about this story. Who do you empathize with? Whose version of events resonate? Can you accept that the thoughts and actions and intentions and deeds and consequences here might conflict, overlap, and be unjust for a whole range of reasons that the story makes clear? If roles were reversed, would the same things have happened? We aren't handed a neat bow-wrapped ending here, and I think that's the point. Join us next week for Memories of Mirrored Worlds by Barbara A. Barnett. Hello everyone, Marguerite here. A quick technical update. Cast of Wonders will be moving its RSS feed to Libsyn at the end of October. And if all goes well, very shortly afterward, will be available on Spotify. For 99% of our audience, the transition should be transparent. Tech things will happen behind the scenes, and your podcatcher will continue to receive new episodes every week. If you're using a handcrafted method of reaching our episodes, you may need to update your location feed. What you might notice is the feed won't have episodes from before 2018 anymore. Unfortunately, it's a technical limitation we can't do anything about, but don't worry. All our episodes are always available for free on the website and on Spotify once it's up and running. We'll keep you posted as the change approaches. Thanks for listening. We love bringing you the best audio fiction week after week, but we can't do it without your support. Your donations pay our authors, our narrators, our servers, and our staff. Please consider supporting us with a monthly donation through either PayPal or Patreon. You can also review us on iTunes, request us on Spotify, and consider the stories we publish for award consideration. There are lots of ways you can help. Join the discussion on the EA Forum, forum.escapeartists.net, or come visit us on Twitter at Cast of Wonders. Cast of Wonders is a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and is brought to you by the creative team of assistant editors Catherine Inskip and Alexis Goebel. Our associate editors are Tonya Bezpalko, Amy Brennan, Alicia Caporaso, Trace Von Teal, William Height Minor, Andrew K. Ho, Sean Proctor, Ray O, Susie Rodriguez, Carissa Sluss, Emma Smales, and Chris Tang. Our audio producer is Jeremy Carter. Our community manager is Danny Daly, and I remain as always your humble editor and host, Marguerite Kenner. Our episodes are released under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can download or listen to the episode on any device you like for free, but you can't change it or sell it. Our theme music, Appeal to Heavens, is by Alexei Nov and available from Promo DJ or his Facebook page. Thanks for listening.